Naveen, you are, I think, still in the north, near the border with Lebanon. You've been very actively involved in everything that's been happening since this war got started. What is what does the situation look like from where you sit? Where are you, and what's happening around you?
We still in the north, and I will beginning in the situation here. The week in the ceasefire in Gaza was very difficult week. The pleasure that Hamas is realizing the division that Hamas made with the children and the mothers, the delay, just thinking about what they are going through and how time passes for the families of the abductees was really hard. The stories we heard from the abductees were really very hard. I had the opportunity to participate in the rally of the abductees in Tel Aviv and to hear from those who returned and those who are still waiting for their children and parents to return. It was really very, very difficult. And now about the situation in the north and with Hezbollah on purpose. I say Hezbollah because our problem is this terrorist. During the ceasefire, we had a few days of calm. We returned to normality, and immediately after the truce, they returned to firing rockets at the villages and the moshavs in the north. Fortunately for us, it falls in an open place or in villages that have been evacuated. And there are no wounded or dead. And yet there is great damage both in nature and in houses. And this is the difference between how Israeli conducts the war and takes care of keep of its citizens and how it is in Gaza, for example. We at the Homefront Command are taking advantage of this time, which we call this time a golden time, to prepare the citizens for war. We expect that if a war is really declared, it will be really difficult and not like in the South. Where at least 4,000 missiles are expected from Lebanon to Israel, and it will be very difficult. So we are arrange everything in this golden time. And one last thing about communication. In Israel, they don't share everything that happens, especially in the north, for many reasons. And one of these reasons is not stress the citizens, as long as it's a financial damage and not people who are injured and die. They will not disrupt for scare them. They also blocked Lebanese channels that belong to Hezbollah in Israel, as long as we cannot see what's happening there. And also we cannot know what happened here, just if we went off or if we can get for these places, because a lot of streets and the moshavs was closed just for the army. So sometimes I can go and check one time, like sometimes I want to help the soldiers there or to bring foods and something like that. So when I see what happens, I just understand really how it's become like difficult. We know that it will be long. The war, it will be very long. It's feel like we are in war, but we try to explain for the citizens that it's just preparing for war. So it's not easy. We need your prayer, and that's it.
Thank you. How's your son? I know he's still
It,
mobilized, right?
yeah, yeah. but he now in the north, and it's for me it's more easy that I know that he's in the north, and until now it's not like the south, but it's still difficult for me that he's not here in this difficult time. But also I can go and visit him, and yeah, and once like he was here the last weekend.
I'm sure you fed him very well.
Yes.
Phaedra, I want to ask you about the situation you're in. I mean, you're actually not far from where Naveen is, but you're living in a Jewish community. We're in the middle of, or about to be in the middle of the Hanukkah season, festive season ordinarily. What is the feeling where you are, you're within your family, but among your neighbors in the community? This thing's been dragging on now for 2 months. I can imagine completely exhausting. How are you handling it?
So I am in the north. I'm close to Naveen, but far enough away that, it's much quieter. It's much safer. We haven't had a rocket alert in a very long time. What we do have is a city that is, almost doubled in population. So we're, full of evacuees. At the hotels, there's a new school being built right near our home, specifically a school for evacuees, which also is kind of in line with that realization that this is not going to be over soon, and that more permanent solutions are going to be needed. So that, I have 2 in the Army. Both of them safe. My son was just called to the Golan Heights, which is safe. And my daughter is an officer in charge of reservists, not far from Haifa. So the general feeling is, yes, there is a certain tiredness for sure, because this is going on, but there is a very strong recognition that this is, that there are no choices. There's no options, that this is not a situation that we want to be in. This is a situation that we absolutely must be in, that we cannot return evacuees in the north or in the south to communities until we can assure their safety. We cannot, we're still waiting for, it was very, wonderful and inspiring, hope inspiring to see hostages returned, but that's only, just the beginning. And the reports that came out, they're still coming out about what the hostages endured while they were in captivity, makes this situation, all the more urgent, because of course we're terrified about what's going on there for the people who are still in. So there is, a weariness, and I know mothers who've seen their sons for 24 hours since October 7th, 24 hours. But there is also, there's just a very deep feeling of mutual aid, of support. People are out volunteering. My son, my 18-year-old, is out picking apples to make sure that the harvests come in. So, the sort of grassroots organic community efforts are still going strong, and that's very inspiring.
How does it work with these evacuees? You're in Tiberias, I believe. They come, where are they in hotels, or are they sleeping on, people's couches? How are they taken care of?
Overwhelmingly in hotels. The government made sure that very, very quickly, it took a couple of days, but very quickly that there would be, payment to, and good payment to make sure that the hotels would be welcoming evacuees. Of course, some people, for very obvious reasons, I mean, it's very difficult to live with a family in a hotel room. You have no privacy. It's hard. So the people who have the means have chosen, to rent places or Airbnb. That is going on. For sure, but overwhelmingly, I mean, that's a very expensive long-term proposition. So that's hotels.
I want to follow up, Phaedra, with reference to a piece you just published in First Things. It's called Israel's Virtues. I think it's relevant for what we're talking about here. What is it that you are pointing out, arguing in that piece, and how is it related to this, this wartime situation?
Well, it really came out of my being amazed at how not only did civil order not break down under this incredible stress of October 7th and the quick mobilization of hundreds of thousands of reservists, not only did civil order not break down, but in fact, the exact opposite happened, that civil order, in fact, became more robust. I mean, October 6th, we were demonstrating and fighting and arguing all the time. October 8th, we were all making sure that everybody, we were all making sandwiches for each other and, for soldiers, and giving rides to make sure the soldiers were getting to bases. In fact, that Saturday night, immediately, I was called and was driving soldiers back and forth to bases, together with ultra-Orthodox, totally secular, young people, older people, like everybody has pitched in. So I was sort of thinking about why that is the case, because I don't think it's something that there's obvious we could take for granted that would have been the outcome. So I was looking also at the book, The Genius of Israel, which I was really very impressed with. And what was interesting is that book came out before October 7th, but everything, all the insights are very much true for the situation that we find ourselves in now, that there are things that Israel does right and that does very differently from the rest of the West that allows us to respond in this way. And I think that everything from, having a Sabbath, having large families, large being, even secular families, a norm would be 3 children, having a small country, which is, just a sort of stroke of luck, I guess, giving leadership roles to young people at a very early age and sort of realizing that, in fact, I'm dependent on my 21-year-old kid for my safety. These kinds of things, earlier marriage, a sense, knowing that you're going to the army, a sense of obligation, or that you must do some kind of national service, a sense of duty. These all come together, I think, to allow us to not rely on the state, that the state will fix everything, but that we take a really active role in building the nation, that we're all very much in this together, and that everybody has a role to play. And you might be 20 years old, but we're relying on you. And you might be 15, and you might be 53, but like everybody takes a part in this. So communities and families and neighborhoods is really where we found that the power lies, and not waiting for the government to fix things.
It's such a fascinating thesis, and really would encourage everybody to read this book that you mentioned. It was actually co-written by one of our board members, Dan Senor, The Genius of Israel. It's different from his previous book, their previous book, Startup Nation, which talked about, kind of the economic lessons that Israel could teach the world. This book focuses on what you're referring to, Phaedra, which is kind of the cultural lessons. And I think, and I'm speaking as somebody sitting in the United States, a country where our sense of purpose which the two authors identify as really the core of what, kind of gives Israel this vitality, has been lost, or certainly is unraveling. I think there is a lot to learn, certainly for people of faith, from that book. Before I turn to Ihab and Hadil and talking about the Palestinian and Arab side of this, I want to come back to you quickly, Naveen, and ask you kind of what I asked Phaedra in terms of the community. So you are Aramean, but you're sitting in a largely the Arab side of Israel, so to speak. How is it like in the Arab Israeli community, both Christian and non-Christian? Is there that same sense of community, that same sense of coming together, or is it divided?
So I talk a lot about it the last 2 weeks, because what happened in Israel when they ask not to share anything pro-Hamas, like Shomer HaChomot, what happened here inside Israel, it's become more easy that you don't hear anything from the Arabs here. In our village, it's also like they host here the IDF. We feel that there are very sad about what happened in October 7, but we still feel that something will change after the war. We beginning here people that say we don't want, like the Jewish side, we don't want to have Arabs in the schools, in the kindergarten. We try to explain that we are not all the same. I usually say also that like Aramaic, like I thank God that I am Aramaic, and also that I recognize in the ID as Aramaic and not as Arabs, and it's for me very important. I want to share, and usually I share that I am Christian and not Arabs. And it's make me worried a little bit about the other, because the last time when I was in like few weeks ago in a wedding, that I think that the only not Jewish was just me and my husband. I just look when I speak Arabic how they look to me, and was like very afraid. It's make me worried, and I asked my husband not to speak Arabic. Please, we will speak just Hebrew. In this time, we still all the time stay in Jish. We don't leave. We cannot leave, and we are not allowed to leave all the time. Maybe sometimes the street is closed, so we try to stay more in our area. But I think that it will be very difficult after the war between Arabs and Jewish in this area. And
Well, thanks, Naveen and Phaedra. I think the real beauty and power of what we do at Philos is trying to, straddle different worlds, even within the same region. And obviously there is this whole other side to this conflict, the Palestinian side. Both the Palestinians in Gaza, the Palestinians in the West Bank, those who support Hamas, those who don't, and of course Palestinians all around the world. Ihab, you're from the West Bank, but currently in the United States. I want to ask you, as someone who's obviously watching this very closely, having a personal connection that goes very deep, also being on social media, Arabic social media, Palestinian social media. What is the conversation in that world that maybe we who don't speak Arabic are not hearing? Is there a debate about Hamas, about the future of the Palestinian people? Obviously, most of the conversation, I'm sure, is about what's happening in Gaza, the casualties, the families. What can you tell us about the feeling right now, and maybe the different feelings among Palestinians that you're seeing?
Yeah, Robert. Yeah, absolutely. Like the conversation in the Palestinian street now is just like looking for this war to end. Actually, especially in Gaza, and people like with this immense catastrophe in Gaza, like casualties, destruction. Like we talking about like 17,000 people until now get killed in this war, and people looking for trust, for ceasefire. The thing is different in West Bank is that people in West Bank are, I can't say they are care about what's going on in Gaza, but they are like the Hamas popularity in West Bank. It's more high than in Gaza. In Gaza, it's very low now because people looking for just a ceasefire, just to end this war, and they are not looking to this war to continue because the amount of destruction in Gaza and the situation there is now people is standing in lines just to get some food. Now people are standing in lines to get some water. Now people are standing in lines to get some medicine, and there is no medicine. Even the humanitarian aid in Gaza is not enough for the people there. So the conversation, the discourse in Gaza absolutely is different from the discourse and conversation in West Bank. In Gaza, absolutely, people looking to end this war. They are not looking to this war to continue. And like, I can say, like, how many the amount of dehumanization for Palestinian people in social media are unacceptable. It's unbelievable how much they believe like, I guess them people are elected Hamas or whatever, so deserve that. It's unbelievable. It's unacceptable because not all Gazan people are Hamas, and not all Gazan people are looking for the war. Absolutely.
Do you think that anything has changed for better or for worse within on the Palestinian street? I mean, is this clarified um, the you know the vision of those who oppose Hamas? Has it you know given them more strength? Are they maybe more understood, respected, heard by other Palestinians, or I mean, does it go the other way, or maybe somewhere in between?
No, actually, there we have a good, like amount of people who are against what Hamas did, and even the Palestinian president Mahmoud Abbas did that. Like he stated, Fatah people, PLO people said that they're looking for to end this war. There is many Palestinian like looking for the Gaza as okay, like what Hamas did, but now we are like facing the catastrophe for the innocent people in Gaza. I don't think Palestinian people now are enabled talking about. They are able talking about what's the after the war, what's we have to do with Hamas or whatever. It's this discourse in Palestinian street. It's not exist actually. It's like the vision of the Gaza now. It seems like people very pessimism about what's the after of the war because they're seeing how this is the whole destruction in the Gaza now, and how much that destruction need to rebuild, even if it will be with Hamas or not Hamas. And people so afraid that they will be displaced from Gaza to Sinai, and with this amount of claims from Israeli politicians, from the current government about they're looking to displace Gaza people to the Sinai, and people will not leave. That's the discourse in Gaza now. They are looking for safe zone, to be in safe zone, but at the same time they are not looking to be out of Gaza and not allowed to return.
I saw an article this morning, I think it was in Times of Israel, and it was quoting I believe he's the top Sharia judge for the Palestinian Authority, speaking on behalf of Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority president. And this gentleman said that Abu Mazen, the Mahmoud Abbas, has condemned the actions of Hamas in, I think they gave a number like 37 or 41 phone calls with world leaders, right? With President Biden, with President Macron, with a number of different people. But this gentleman also explained Abu Mazen's public reluctance to condemn Hamas as justified because of what Israel's done in the war. So for people who don't follow Palestinian politics, why would the president of the Palestinian Authority condemn Hamas in private calls with world leaders, but not give that condemnation publicly? It seems like he would only gain by publicly condemning Hamas. Why wouldn't he?
Yeah, because he looking for his popularity in the Palestinian streets, especially during the wartime. So I believe he did that before even this war. He did many times. He made a tons of statements against what Hamas did for people in Gaza, what Hamas did for Palestinian case, what they brought for the Palestinian case of destruction, and he said stated that tons of time about he is not looking for the war. He's not looking for, because he said we witnessed many times war, and what we get from that, nothing. So why he did that privately? Because he are not looking for his popularity to be low. It's very low in the Palestinian street, so he's not looking for that to be low more. And especially during the wartime, the Palestinian politicians, the Palestinian people believe it's not appropriate way to talk about condemning Hamas while people are still dying in Gaza. There is many dead, but this is the Palestinian street conversation about. It's not a time to talk about condemning Hamas or not while there's people still dying in Gaza, kids, women, elders, all these innocent people. So it's unacceptable in the Palestinian street to talk in this way while there's still people dying in Gaza. Until the war is end, there's no way to do that.
Adil, I want to turn to you before moving north to Habib. You are also in Washington. You're covering the Arab world more generally. What are you seeing, in that broader conversation in terms of, Arabs and their views of the conflict, pro Hamas, against Hamas? Is it the majority of one or the other? Is there a realization about the significance of this war? I mean, I know it's a very, very general question, but how could you, for people who are not following that space, what can you tell us about what's being said?
Yes, thank you, Robert. It depends on which part of the Arab world we're talking about. Let me start by talking about an article that will be published for me in the Christian Post in the coming days, where I'm arguing or discussing the position of the Arab Christians, the indigenous Christians of the Middle East, especially the Syrians, the Lebanese, the Iraqi Christian position from what's happening. The way the Christians of the region see this war, what Hamas started in Gaza is just another conflict, another remedy for instability that will contribute to the departure of more Christians from their countries, from Syria, from Lebanon, from Iraq, especially Lebanon. Now, I talked to many Lebanese politicians. I talked to many Lebanese friends from our church here in Washington, D.C., which is an Anatolian Orthodox church. Most of the attendees are Lebanese, Syrian Christians, and they are terrified of what Hamas has done because they think that Hezbollah is dragging Lebanon now into a war. We saw a horrible statement a few days ago from Hamas calling for Lebanese people to join the war, telling Lebanese people that they are opening recruitment offices inside Lebanon, a country that historically was inhabited by a majority of Christians. They are opening recruitment offices today to recruit people, Lebanese people, to join the war against Israel. So the way many Christians are seeing what Hamas has done is a remedy for the end of Christianity in the Middle East, unfortunately. Also, I see that the opinions about what happened in the Gulf region, in Saudi Arabia, in UAE, in Bahrain, started to change at the end of November and now in December, especially when a group closely tied by Iran, the Houthi militia in Yemen, started to drag Yemen also into this war, started to try to attack Israel by drones and by missiles. The Houthi militia, to those who don't know a lot about it, it's an Iranian-backed militia that is in control of big part of Yemen, which is in the Arabian Peninsula region. The Houthi for years, they attacked United Arab Emirates, they attacked Saudi Arabia, they killed hundreds and hundreds of civilians, innocents in Yemen, one of the poorest countries in the world, with the support of Iran. When the Arabs, when the Muslims of the Arabian Peninsula now see that the Houthi is part of this conflict, they are very terrified. They are very hesitant to stand with Hamas. We hear more condemnation in the last few days for Hamas from the Arabian Peninsula, especially when Hamas praised the Houthi militia. So I see change in the positions. And sorry, I'm losing my voice. I have to drink some water.
No problem. I want, if I was there, I want to like reach through the screen and give you some water.
Yeah,
but
thank you.
I'm glad you
Thank
have
you.
some.
So,
Go ahead.
yes, this is these are the opinions in the Arabian Peninsula. Even if you look today at the coverage of what's happening in Gaza, in the channels of that are related or close to Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, we see that the rhetoric is changing. Saudi Arabia is covering the war less and less every day. There were a lot of criticism from some Islamists to Saudi Arabia because they decided to continue a program that was previously planned, a series of parties, of celebrations that are taking place today in Saudi Arabia. The Saudis decided not to cancel that. And I think big part of that is because Hamas is praising the Houthis. Hamas is showing more like connection to Iran with what happened to Gaza. So this is the case in the Arabian Peninsula region. When it comes to groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, groups that are closely tied to Iran, I see more extremism among these circles. Unfortunately, we see escalation in the attacks that are targeting the U.S. forces in Iraq. On daily basis, the U.S. forces in Iraq are under attacks from Iran-backed militias in Iraq. I was also reading statements by the FBI director warning from potential terror attacks against churches, against synagogues here in the United States during the season because of what's happening in Gaza. So people who were somehow supportive of Hamas are more supportive of them right now in the region. People who were skeptical of how they look at Hamas, they are going more and more against Hamas today because of the obvious connection between Hamas and other extremist groups and the Iranian regime today because of what's happening. I see the Arab governments are very worried from what's happening in Gaza today. The popularity that Hamas is gaining among extremist groups Yes, a lot is happening. It's still the most important news now that's followed by the Arab public. Although, as I said, many Arab networks are trying to focus on different issues right now.
It's so important, I think, for those of us in the US to hear that, because, you know, from the outside it seems very monolithic, right? That everybody in the Arab world feels the same way, but you're pointing out a lot of differences between countries, between religious communities, you know, ideological groups, and those things need to be factored in for those of us trying to make sense of what's happening. Hadil, you mentioned Lebanon. I want to go to Lebanon, actually. Habib, you are in the country that from which rockets are, you know, passing over Naveen's house. One, I want to ask you about two things. One, the general mood inside the country. Again, 2 months into this war, there was a lot of worry about will Hezbollah, to be more precise, enter this war, expand it, make it a regional war, or not? Is that still a question? How are people feeling? The second question I want to ask you is maybe a little more specific. I think just as you know, I was asking Ihab, why is Mahmoud Abbas in this kind of middle position, kind of lukewarm position? He's on one hand condemning Hamas, but on the other hand, not condemning it publicly. I want to ask you about Hezbollah's position, because it would make sense if Hezbollah, you know, for whatever reason, maybe self-preservation, did nothing in the north, stayed quiet, didn't fire missiles, rockets. And it would probably also make sense for Hezbollah, based on its mission, based on its, you know, benefactors' strategy in Iran, to go all out and start a war. And yet what we're seeing is something in between, some kind of slow, steady, small, but nevertheless lethal use of force by Hezbollah in northern Israel. So my second question is, why is that? What is Hezbollah doing, and what does it have to gain?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Let me start by agreeing with what Hadil was saying about the call by Hamas in Lebanon, of course, with Hezbollah's blessing, to create and form armed units to support Gaza. This precipitated an immediate condemnation by many in Lebanon, including and foremost among them Christian groups. So what Naveen said is accurate. People are afraid of that and are openly condemning it in a place like Lebanon. Look, the fears in Lebanon related to this war are constantly evolving. First, it was the fear of the spread of the war north beyond the southern border area, a kind of creeping escalation. And especially just before the pause, when Israel targeted and killed Muhammad Raad's son and a few others among the Hezbollah elite unit. Muhammad Raad, of course, is the leading MP in the Lebanese parliament supporting Hezbollah. He's a member of Hezbollah. So people were afraid that that would be the trigger to escalate. Thankfully, it wasn't. And now the prevailing fears are what will happen after the war? What kind of post-war settlement will ensue? A kind of 1701 resuscitation scenario, if you like. 1701 being the UN resolution that for a long time was supposed to prevent Hezbollah from being in certain areas of the south near the Israeli border, but that was thrown to the wind, and Hezbollah are right there now. So as Defense Minister Gallant said yesterday, Hezbollah will be moved to north of the Litani River. 40 kilometers to the north, either by a comprehensive agreement, he said, or by military force. And this is, of course, a requirement for Israeli border towns if they want to resume normal life right there next to the border. Now, I think, in answer to your second question, I think Iran and Hezbollah have been smarter than to engage in an all-out war. And perhaps Farhad can say more about that. But I think they've been playing this middle game basically because Nasrallah spoke about the unity of fronts. So he can't just sit there quietly and look on as this is going on. At the same time, we all know that for Iran, Hezbollah is the jewel in the crown in terms of how much money they've spent on it, how much arms they have, the kind of infrastructure they've built, and the prize potentially, which could be Lebanon. I mean, they are now dominant in Lebanon, but if a post-war settlement somehow makes this de facto situation de jure, or at least in the eyes of the international community, the Arabs, the United States, Israel, you know, let Hezbollah take over Lebanon. What's the big deal if they can keep the border quiet? I think that would be a major mistake on the part of Israel, the United States, the Arabs, the West in general. It would tell me that very few of the lessons of October 7 have been actually absorbed. Why do I say that? Well, because it is true, Hezbollah and Iran are showing a lot of pragmatism, and you know, in theory, could go for all sorts of deals. But we have two issues. First of all, they have a very toxic ideology, which they still cling to. And the other one is the impending nuclear capability by Iran. So the combination of that capability and the toxic ideology would mean, if Lebanon is totally abandoned to Iran, it would mean that Iran is sitting right there on Israel's border with the incentive ideologically at some point down the road to do much worse than what Hamas has done in Gaza, and at the same time having, you know, the nuclear umbrella over Hezbollah. So this is essentially the nature of the fear right now. I said the fears are evolving in Lebanon right now. People are afraid of what will happen after. Will the settlement, quote unquote, happen at Lebanon's expense? And at the expense of, you know, the diversity, the pluralism, the whatever freedoms remain in this country. Remember, Lebanon is, even before October 7, was damaged goods. I mean, we still have a collapsed economy, deepening poverty, prices through the roof, escalating immigration, including by Christians, no job prospects, political paralysis, a huge Syrian presence, 1.5 million plus in Lebanon. I mean, these are very major problems. And to add to all of this, a kind of confirmation of Hezbollah's dominance of Lebanon, I think may in the short term yield some calm, but it's setting up the region and Israel and the West, I should say, for a much bigger problem down the road.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I want to get to the two we have not gotten to. We're going a little over, but it's important that we get a full picture. Farhad, a lot has been said already. The word Iran has been mentioned. This is the country you were born and raised in. You are somebody who watches Iran very closely. What's the thinking in Iran? What are you seeing in Farsi media? Is the regime also evolving the same way that things are evolving in Lebanon? What is there a rhyme or reason you could explain to us why they're doing this sort of middle taking this middle path in Lebanon, why they're, as Hadil mentioned, activating the Houthis. What's the goal here? What are they actually trying to do?
Thank you very much, Robert. So the goal of Iranians, unlike many people who think that Iran has not entered the war, it has not activated Hezbollah to enter the war. Iranians actually have been starting the war right at the same day that Hamas started the war, the terror attack on Israel on October 7th. So since that time, I think they have carried out over 70 missile and drone attack on the American bases. And they mostly work, as we know, through proxies. They don't directly get engaged in wars. So that's how Iranians are operating, and they see this in a broader context of the conflict with the United States. Even they see the conflict between Hamas and Israel as a conflict between the Islamic Republic and the United States. So it was just a few days ago that Ayatollah Khamenei said that the process of de-Americanization in the Middle East has already been started, and that's their goal. But unfortunately, people in the United States do not recognize this. They do not recognize that Iran has entered the war. I know you and other colleagues talked about the fact that Hezbollah has not entered the war in a way that they entered the war in 2006. But as I said, they act through other proxy groups like Houthis in Yemen and their proxies in Iraq and in Syria. So far, they have carried out a lot of attack on American forces, and that's part of the united front against the United States, against Hezbollah. So that's their thinking. The thinking in Tehran is that they already have been into the war, and they escalate day by day. I don't know why Washington has not recognized this fact. So my if I want to suggest some advices to Biden administration, I would say that the Biden administration has to take a number of steps. The first step is to recognize that Iran has already started the war and is seeking to dominate the region even more stronger and more aggressive than what it did before the October 7th. So recognition of this is really important, because if the United States' major goal is to remain silent with the hope of not getting into a major conflict with Iran, this silence actually encourages Iran to escalate more, and perhaps to encourage the regime to give a green light to Hezbollah to enter the war. So that's probably the biggest mistake that the Biden administration is making, that, okay, by remaining silent, they will stay away from major conflict with Iran. So that's the first step. The second step, I think, is for the Biden administration to allow Israel to finish Hamas. Insisting on Israel to pause, to ceasefire, this will just only help Hamas and the Islamic Republic. So I think the next step for Washington is to stop insisting on Israel to pause and ceasefire. I totally understand the human loss in Gaza. Of course, I do not trust the information published by the health organization of Hamas, but still, even if one child is dead because of the bombing and things, that's still a matter of concern, and I recognize that. But I still believe that the moral responsibility of all of those killing in Gaza is on Hamas and the Islamic Republic's shoulder, not Israel. So that's the second step. The third step is to respond forcefully to the Islamic Republic's provocations. If they encourage Houthis to attack the ships and the waters, including they actually attacked one of the American destroyers, and it's a disaster that Biden administration does not want to recognize that they attacked the American destroyers. So here Biden administration should change course, because as I said, it would be catastrophic if they keep silent. So they have to respond forcefully and not proportionally. No, they have to respond forcefully, because if the response is proportionally, Iranians would continue to do that. Iranians would only stop when the force is significant. That's the only deterrence that works with Iranians. Another step is imposing severe financial and diplomatic pressure on the regime. Since the October 7th, the terror attack by Hamas, Iranians not only engaged in conflict through proxies, they also escalated their nuclear program, they escalated the ballistic missile program. So why they do that? Because they know, I mean, they understand the politics in Washington. They know that actually, since Biden came to power, Iranian media close to the Revolutionary Guards called Biden wet noodle. They still have the same mindset. They know that Biden is not the one who contained them. So they continue with their bad behavior. And one of the things that they have done is progress in the nuclear program and the ballistic missile program, which is really, really dangerous and threatening. So here, Biden administration should impose severe financial and diplomatic pressure on the regime. So combination of these factors are really important. Biden administration has to change course. I believe something like a policy like what George Kennan recommended against Soviet Union here is necessary for the Biden administration to counter the influence of the Iranian regime. So again, if Biden administration thinks that not getting engaged in, in sort of countering the regime would save the administration from engaging in a conflict, actually it would facilitate a major conflict with the Islamic Republic. That is my understanding by focusing on Iran and by reading the Farsi media that basically reflects the mindset of the officials and the Iranian regime.
Thank you, Farhad. That's very helpful, and it's very counterintuitive, I think, for most Americans. And I think there's a particular difficulty understanding this idea of peace through strength, of the use of significant force as a way of mitigating conflict among Christians. I think, and we just did a survey, it'll go public here shortly, of American Christians and their views on this war. And one of the things that we saw is that while 83% of American Christians support bold measures taken on the part of Israel against Hamas, when you dig into that a bit, there's a confusion as to what the right end goal should be and the best means of achieving it. Andrew, I want to turn to you, not just because Farhad mentioned George Kennan, someone you've studied quite a bit, but also because you were in the decision-making apparatus of the U.S. government not that long ago on questions such as these. What is the state of play in the U.S. government right now? What's the reasoning behind our policy? What is our policy?
Well, as with any complex organization with hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of distinct parts, even Hamas, you can't look at it and say this is the decision making. It's rarely a single person. These are complex factors that go in. So I can't speak with certainty about the U.S. government. What they're doing. There is something I want to follow up on something that Farhad and Habib both said, and this is speculation, but and it's my own speculation, but I did say from the outset that I didn't think Hezbollah was going to be involved, and I did say in one of our calls and on our podcast, Robert, that I thought Israel having a fully mobilized army in the north along the border with Lebanon would be in a very strong negotiating position. And that is what I think is happening here. And I think Yoav Gallant going to the north, I don't think he would have done that without phone calls between several key Arab states, Sunni Arab states in the region, and Israel. And I think the fact that that's happening, I think what may be happening here is a little bit of jujitsu by the Israelis to force the arm of the Biden administration and say, you want to, you do have indirect negotiations with Iran ongoing. If you want to use that relationship, if you want to try it your way, that's fine. But part of these negotiations are going to be as follows. The state of Israel is not going to tolerate Hezbollah along its border. This is the lesson that we learned in the South. And I think when he says Hezbollah is going to have to move back to the Litani, I think that's a very clear negotiating point. It's a very clear war aim, we might say. And I think they know that the Biden administration is fairly weak, wants this conflict over. And I think it wouldn't surprise me if the Gulf and other key Sunni Arab allies are saying, or rather I should say partners are saying, we'd like to see the killing drawn down in Gaza, and we'd like to see some of these efforts redirected at what we all know is the major threat in the region, and that is Iran and its proxy. Now, Iran doesn't want to lose either a first strike or counter-strike capability in Hezbollah. And most Hezbollah members don't want to die somewhere between the South Lebanon border and the Litani. But Israel's army fully mobilized and along that border, I think this is just the thing that nobody's really thinking about, and that is that the Israelis might take a preventive approach to the threat that Hezbollah poses while they have their army fully mobilized and on heightened alert. And this is something that probably would catch the Biden administration a little bit off guard. And I think it's precisely the right way to approach a permanent threat on your border. And so I think we're going to see more of this in the weeks ahead. And I think there's going to be, while the Gulf states and other Sunni Arab states have had to publicly condemn what's going on in Gaza, I think Israel's response is going to be, okay, if we have to draw things down there, we are escalating elsewhere to make sure that our country is secure.
You know, we've covered a lot of ground here, not just in terms of the regional picture, but, you know, hitting both the personal side of this as well as the kind of the geopolitical side. Phaedra, I want to come back to you here on the eve of Hanukkah. Any closing thoughts based on what you've heard from your colleagues and, you know, just what you're feeling in this moment?
Yeah, I just want to pick up on something based on what Naveen was talking about. And, you know, October 8th, this was certainly like a big concern. What was all this going to mean for Arabs in Israel? What was society going to look like, and how would people react to that? And I, in no way, I mean, I'm not living that reality, and Naveen is, and I certainly don't in any sense mean to denigrate those concerns. But I want to say I was late, and this is just, you know, anecdotal. I was late on this call because I was bringing my daughter to a doctor's appointment. The 8 people in line for the Arab doctor were not concerned in the least that she's an Arab. And everything that I have seen, and again, I haven't sought it out, but it's just, you know, purely simple day-to-day life. Again, let me say, I live in Tiberias. It's the closest thing to sort of redneck Israel that exists. This is not sort of enlightened Ashkenazi secular Israel. Okay, this is religious Mizrahi people who came from Arab countries. All I have seen is, and again, this I'm sure is not the complete picture, but even in a city like this, where you know, values of pluralism are not something we can take for granted, let's say, all I have seen is politeness and care and the same level of friendship and casual joking and people speaking Arabic and people speaking Hebrew with people speaking Arabic that I saw before. So again, not in any way to downplay what Naveen is seeing and worrying about, but also to add maybe you know, on this eve of Hanukkah, a kind of hopeful note that maybe we already have some foundations in place that will help us through this in Israel.
Well, I truly hope that that's true. That's a question I've been asking myself quite a bit. I really want to thank all of you for staying on this call, giving us your perspective. It's, you know, I've said it 1,000 times if I've said it once. You guys are the core of the Philos Project. Your perspectives, very valuable for me just as a person in doing this work. Thank you for everything, Phaedra. Chag Sameach, and we'll talk to you all very soon. Take care.
Thank you,
Thank
Robert.
you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Robert. Bye all.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.